Are you ready to start these things? Or
Oh,
got to be careful when I'm a co-host, Sherry.
so we are live if you want to wait 4 more minutes.
Yeah.
Attendees will be coming in, but we are live.
So
I have
mind your
I have
P's
the
and
option
Q's.
of leaving the webinar too. That might be good.
So
Oh,
we'll,
dear.
just, we'll
Yeah.
wait for Sean. See where he is. Sean, where be you? Oh, we have a 17 attendees. Fantastic. For the attendees, just so you know, we accidentally started the recording 4 minutes early and we can't stop it. So you're going to have to sit in contemplative silence for the next 3.5 minutes or so while we wait for Sean Henry to join us, and then we will begin.
So this is our final one, right?
Yes, it's the last meeting.
I'm in contemplative silence.
There's been a wonderful outpouring of public interest. I'm sure Sean and the planning board wish they'd gotten that level of input 3 years ago when they started this discussion.
Or even last year when they were. All right,
21.
ranking up there. There's Mr. Henry.
Sorry, Catherine has a ZBA meeting, so I had to steal somebody else's camera.
Well, we are live, so we accidentally started the recording a bit early, so
You did that last time too.
not me, I didn't do it.
Nothing like launching into business.
Hello,
So-
everybody.
2 minutes.
Sean, I'll control the slides again. Is that
Yep,
how you
sounds
prefer?
good.
Sure, okay.
Yep, thank you.
You're going to be going with the 90-minute presentation tonight, right?
Yes.
right.
Sean, I just
Lots
want, my back is bothering me a little bit, Sean, so I hope you can speed it up on that part. We've seen that part a couple of times now.
Yeah.
Okay. 85 minutes.
Succinctness would go a long way so we can let
I
people
will.
have their fill of talking and sharing their concern.
Very little minutia tonight from me.
You've been a yeoman to put in all this effort, communications,
Thank you.
like a proud parent sharing its baby.
Yeah.
Not sure everybody's going coochie coochie coo though.
I was going to say this baby isn't liked by a lot of people.
It's a squawker.
Yep, there are people who've called this baby ugly.
Baby ugly. Yeah. You're the guy who shows up on the plane and sits in the middle seat with a screaming baby. Shoot, that's me. Stop.
We have 26 joining us so far. What was the number that was in the meeting last night for
4,000.
Lanesville? It was over 100?
It was 101 at the max with the panelists. So
That was
what's that?
4,000.
96.
That's great. Good
All right.
engagement.
Without further introduction, we're 5:30. Want to rock and roll?
Yeah, 5:30.
If you are already, I'm ready to launch her off.
We are.
Okay, so we're taking this Ward 1 community meeting about the proposed zoning changes public this evening, and this is an opportunity for us to bring you up to speed on these proposals. This is the 5th and final community introduction to this. We want to focus on your general concerns about the 9 specific proposals, of which actually six are really material proposals. 3 of them are more footnote corrections. And we want to give you an opportunity to express your specific, if possible, your specific feelings in favor and opposed to these recommendations, and we'd like to hear from you why you think that these are appropriate and good or inappropriate and bad for Gloucester. So that being said, my name is Scott Memhard. Welcome. I am the Ward 1 City Councilor. With us tonight is Councilor at Large Jason Groh and Sean Henry representing the Planning Board this evening and to help us with a presentation. And also our recording secretary and clerk, Sherry Carvallis. As I said, this is a Ward 1 informational meeting for the purpose of reviewing the proposed zoning amendments to the Gloucester zoning ordinance sections 2.3.1 residential uses and 3.2 dimensional table and 3.2.2 dimensional requirements for multifamily dwellings and their accessory uses other than signs. And then finally, 3.1.6b, building heights in excess of 35 feet. We're going to start with a presentation by Sean Henry to review these in broad brush and provide some of the background about it. And then we'll transition right into your comments and questions. We won't answer every question tonight, but all of your comments will be recorded and submitted to the Planning and Development Subcommittee of the City Council before any action is taken, any recommendations, or the final public hearing on this matter is before the City Council. That being said, anything else to add to, or should we go right to Sean?
We just acknowledge that Jeff Worthley, City Councilor at Large, is on the call, as is David Rosen, who is also on the Planning Board. And I don't see anyone else. If I'm missing somebody, I apologize, but I think that that covers the elected officials and board representation.
Yes, thank you for commenting that. And we're now up to 40 participants.
All right.
Ready to roll?
Yes,
That's good.
please.
All right. First off, I'll apologize in advance if you see me taking a swig of liquid here. I'm feeling a little under the weather and I may cough here and again, but trying to stay hydrated and take a drink every once in a while to keep from coughing. So I'll start with a little history of how we got to where we're at right now. Back in 2013, the Planning Board initiated a study of the Railroad Avenue area, looking at needs of some of the potential rezoning there to help sort of revitalize the area. Similarly, in 2014, we started taking a look at Main Street to see what kind of amendments could be made to the zoning governing that to try to ensure that Main Street and the Rogers Street corridor, upland section of Rogers Street, remained a vibrant business district and downtown. That led to ultimately realizing that we really need to take a good hard look at our housing. We instituted the housing production plan, which again was to assess what our current state of housing was in the city and to try to assess and estimate what our future needs were going to be. That went from late 2017 to about the end of 2016, which point that was forwarded on to the City Council and ultimately adopted by the City Council in the spring of 2017. From that, we launched the Housing Production Plan Implementation Review Working Group that again, with the Housing Production Plan in hand, started reviewing zoning to see what in our zoning was limiting the production of more housing, which the Housing Production Plan said we needed. I believe again, back in end of 2016, beginning of 2017, the estimated need for Gloucester by 2020 was an additional roughly 650 units of all types of housing, both affordable housing and then market rate housing of all types, from say studio apartments up to more single family homes. But particularly identifying some multifamily needs for seniors, et cetera. So
Sean, if you don't mind my interrupting, I don't want to break your stride here, but would you just mention for our benefit the composition and makeup of the people that you were working with from the community?
Oh, yes.
On the various tasks, but it would be helpful to know
Right.
some of our neighbors that were involved.
Yep. So from the housing production plan, and then that extended into similar makeup in the working group. We had representative myself from the planning board. I believe Rick Noonan was on that as well initially. Paul Lundberg and Jen Holmgren initially from the city council side. We had David, whose last name I'm forgetting, from Gloucester Housing Authority. We had representatives from Action, who at that point were going through permitting the Cameron's project. We had representatives of a local community group called Cape Ann Local Action that was involved at that point. We had 2 representatives from the Affordable Housing Trust that had long experience in multiple housing issues. So pretty broad base. We had a professional consultant who adept at analyzing zoning. And so she did sort of the professional look at identifying areas in the zoning. And that group largely continued, for the most part, some people shifting because of their different roles in and out, but to a large degree, most of those people or positions transferred over to the working group. Ultimately, once the working group for its recommendations to the planning board created a subcommittee, at which point the subcommittee, which is made up of Jane Ripson, Beverly Bunkin, and myself, sort of went through and finalized the amendments that then went up to the planning board, number of meetings at the planning board level, ultimately forwarding those on at the end of last year to the city council. And that gets us to where we're at right now. So I guess we can start this slideshow because I probably should have said that before.
Also, just to let you know, Jane Remsen's joined the attendees also on the planning board.
Very good. So we can skip right to the next one. So that sort of brings us to the history. I'll quickly go through sort of the generalities of what we're talking about here, history of the 2-family, summary of potential build out, and then sort of a history of our height ordinance and how that's changed over the time and comparison to our neighbors around the North Shore, Cape Cod, et cetera. So we can go to the next one. So basically, there's a lot of question about where these have come from. They're entirely locally generated. As I said, they came out of the housing production plan. They weren't sent down from the state or elsewhere for us. These were the product of the work that had been done initially with the housing production plan and then subsequently with the working group that dealt with that. The current requirements that we're looking at changing deal with the 2-family. Currently, these amendments are focused on 2 portions of that, 2-family construction, and then also dimensional requirements, allowances out in the larger districts. So we'll be addressing that in detail later. The affordability issue has come up a lot. People wonder if these amendments are addressing deed restricted affordable, and they are not. These amendments seek to address the need for that other housing that was talked about in the housing production plan, market rate units, specifically at the lower end of the spectrum with more affordably priced, moderately priced, non-deed restricted market rate units. So that's what these deal with here. Another big concern that's been expressed through this process, wondering if there is local control of these, and these amendments are absolutely both generated locally and are entirely within the local control of the city council. The planning board recommends amendments to the city council, and the city council has ultimate authority to approve anything they like or dislike. And specific to this list of 9 amendments, each of these 9 amendments lives or dies on its own. It's not a package of amendments except for how we've sent it up to the city council. City council is free to vote on each of these individually. Of the 9 amendments, 6 of them are actually real amendments, I would say, and then the 3 others are really correcting footnotes that refer back to the 6 major amendments. So I've already mentioned on that, I believe. And then the last thing, again, to touch on affordable housing, because again, people, I think, because of our reference to big A, deed restricted affordable housing, And then also talking about housing that's more affordable. People misconstrue, think that we're actually implying that the lower A affordable is somehow connected with the larger big A affordable housing that is rated and controlled by HUD. These are unrelated. The only way to actually create deed restricted affordable housing is through creating deed restricted affordable housing. Within the city now, we currently have just over 1,000 units of subsidized housing. We can go to the next one. Sorry, I have to catch up with my notes. So the history of two families zones was they were first permitted by special permit back in the 80s. That was followed by a conversion of the two families, a conversion of the ordinance governing two families to by right in 1993. Some of that was changed again to continue allowing by right for new construction, tear downs, and internal conversions in 1998. But at that point, switching conversions that you get through an exterior addition to a special permit via the Zoning Board of Appeals. And that's where we're at right now. So again, current ordinance allows two-family new construction by right. Someone can have an existing single-family dwelling, tear that down, build a new two-family within the confines of zoning setbacks, et cetera, by right. Somebody can take an existing building, carve it up on the inside to create a two-family by right. No approval or neighborhood review required. The only place in our zoning that is required is for conversion of an existing single-family structure to a two-family structure. And again, that sends those people to the ZBA. And what the amendment does here only touches that conversion with exterior modification, removes that special permit requirement, and treats them uniformly with the other ways of getting to two-family. We can go to the next one. In the last 4 years, you can see that the numbers are pretty small of what we've actually produced. Currently, we're just shy of 16 units per year, year over year for the last 4 years from 2018 through the end of 2021. So 16, just shy of 16 units means there have been 8 buildings constructed on average in Gloucester per year that are two-family homes. Similarly, we'll be talking more about the three-family later, but you can see there, on average, we've produced 5 units per year, about average of 5 units per year, which means we've had less than 2 three-family homes created per year, year over year for the last 4 years, whether by conversion or new construction. The other thing I wanted to touch on just briefly in terms of the two-family rights is that the other amendment that's here that touches on two-family is reduction in per unit lot size in our larger districts of R30, R40, and R80. Currently, if you're going to build or convert to a two-family in any of those larger districts, the zoning requires that you double the standard lot size. So you'd be going from 40,000 square feet up to 80,000 square feet, or from 80,000 square feet up to 160,000 square feet. What our amendment does is not affect the lot size itself, but reduces the per unit lot size so that a two-family can be completed on a standard size lot in any of those larger districts. I believe we can go on to the next one. Pardon me for the coughs and sniffles. All right, this is the potential build out this chart represents. You'll see in R5, the potential increase in potential new units is the most dramatic there, from 327 up to 875, because that is not including two-family conversion. It goes straight all the way to three-family and assumes that every house that's compliant not only with the lot size, but with the existing structure would convert and could convert separate other requirements to a three-family structure from either a single or two-family home all the way up to 3 units per dwelling. You'll see in the R10 and R20 districts, there's 0 net change on those. There's been some confusion about that as well. The reason why it's represented as 0 net change is because the ability to get to two-family in both those districts is total number of units 960 or 814 right now. It's been that way since the 80s when two-family was first instituted, that you could build new, convert internally, or through special permit from the ZBA, convert with exterior modification. So that exists now. The only change is that we're removing that special permit, so those numbers don't change in those R20 and R10 zones. You'll see in our larger districts, R30, R40, RC40, R80, the increase in numbers is relatively minimal, and these numbers include both the removal of the ZBA special permit for conversion and the removal of the doubling in lot size requirement. Just to note, currently in R80, there is no special permit required. If you have the required doubling in lot size, then the city doesn't require, it doesn't make any difference in how you get there. You can build new, you can convert internally, or you can convert an existing building with an exterior addition by right in R80. But again, those numbers account for both the in R30, R40, R80, account for both the removal of special permit and the reduction in per unit size. So we can go on to the next one, I believe. So these are the numbers, total lots per district, per zoning district, and the compliant lots. What that means, for those that don't know, is that the lot meets all of the existing zoning requirements for total number of square feet, total frontage, total lot width, setback requirements, everything that's involved with describing the size of that lot fits as well. If it has an existing dwelling on it, that dwelling has to be 100% compliant with all zoning requirements also, meaning that it has to fit within its setbacks. Throughout a lot of the city, we have homes that were built prior to zoning. So even if the lot itself is a substantial size, the dwelling that's on it might encroach on either the front yard setbacks, side yard setbacks. And so again, that means the lot and existing dwelling itself are made non-compliant. So any of those would have to go through the ZBA. And these numbers don't account for compliant structures, because there's no easy way to, as you're going through MapGeo, to actually take a detailed look at the lot and know for certain that the building that's on it is compliant. So this basically just deals, these numbers are specifically about lot compliance themselves. So not to make you guys do the math yourselves, I did it for you. The R10, the total number of compliant lots in R10, about 25.6%. In R20, you're looking at 17% lot compliance. The R30 is 11.5%. R40, you got 27%. RC40 goes down to 4% compliance, and then R80 lots, only a bit less than 15% of those are compliant. And again, what that means is compliant lots is the only way you would exercise any by right use that's allowed in our existing zoning or with these amendments that we're proposing. Was asked to include a count, just so everyone's clear on it. If you go all the way over to the right, the total potential units, the total of those is 2,092 units. I didn't include RC40 on this because RC40, it's not recommended in our amendment to make it a by right use. It's still a special permit use. So of those 11 lots to utilize that potential, they would still have to go through the Zoning Board of Appeals to seek a special permit. So I'm just including the numbers that are potentially by right uses. That's would be a total of 2,082 units, which would mean that 1,146 of your neighbors would have to choose to forego their single family home and convert to a two-family. That would count on all of those homeowners making that choice. So
Sean, could you just explain for us, clarify that RC 40 represents what portion of our neighborhoods?
yeah, RC 40 is, I should have actually gone into that quickly before. RC 40 is predominantly Eastern Point, a little bit of the neighborhood directly across the street from that, and then an area out in on the way to Magnolia along the ocean front there, the harbor front there. So that's, again, principally, the vast majority of it is in your ward, in Ward 1, but there is a bit of it that's over West Gloucester on the way to Magnolia. Again, just so that everyone understands what districts are present in Ward 1, I took a quick look. If you look at R5 district, most of R5 exists in Ward 2, but Ward 1 does have a small bit of that right around the State Fish Pier and the Cripple Cove area. And then it transitions principally to R10 and a mix of marine industrial. That's along the harbor front, all along East Main Street. That's marine industrial, again, which means those houses that are there, residential use there, is non-conforming. Along the other side of East Main Street, there are some neighborhood business districts there that actually don't hold businesses, but hold residences. As you progress down East Main Street, that's principally remains R10. As you get further inland and all the way to the back shore, that's an R20 district. And so that's basically the generality of residential neighborhoods. You do have general industrial zoning in Ward 1 also. That would be principally over by Common Crow and the industrial area behind that. And then extensive business, in addition to that, those small parcels that I mentioned that are along East Main Street, both the shopping centers, Shaw's Shopping Center and the Stop and Shop, those are extensive business as well.
Thank you, that's helpful.
So if we, let's see, I think we're done with that one. Yes, we get back into R5 again on the next slide. It's a pretty small part of Ward 1. As I mentioned, it's just that area outside of the State Fish Pier and Cripple Cove before you transition into the larger R10 zones. But just because the art is included there, the compliant lots in R5, you've got about 36% compliance in this, the smallest of the zones we have. You'll see the conversion numbers there, potential 719 or 791 compliant lots get you 317 conversions from single to three family, 102 potential for 2 to 3, and 5 empty lots. I'm not sure where those are in R5, but five empty lots to get you to, again, a potential total of 875 units in 3 family homes spread throughout the R5. And again, that's if they meet all of the other requirements, including compliance of the existing structure that's on the lot, conservation, wetlands, Title V, if it requires septic, deeds and easements. Yes, parking. People ask about parking with the 3 families quite a bit, and I think people will be happy to know that parking for 3 family is actually more stringent than for a single or 2, because parking can't be by our zoning ordinance. Parking cannot be in the front yard setback area. It has to be either side yard or rear yard where parking is provided. And again, none of these by right uses could be exercised unless the product of the overall outcome of the effort is a completely 100% compliant project. So I think we're on to the next one. I won't bore you with a reading of what's before you there. That is our definition of how we judge height in Gloucester. Apologize again. So again, our zoning, I think I mentioned earlier, our zoning was adopted in the 1960s. Initially, we didn't have any height restrictions within our zoning at all. The first height restriction appeared on our books in 1982 when we adopted 60-foot height restrictions for multifamily homes, meaning apartment complexes, apartment buildings, and commercial buildings. It's hard to tell. Greg Catamatori has been doing a great job trying to trace our history of zoning by looking through what he can find for former amendments, looking through the minutes from both the planning board and the city council. Been very difficult, but what he's been able to make up so far is that in 85 or 86, it was the residential zoning was limited to, or was officiated at made official at 35 feet. That lasted a couple years until like sometime in 1987. It looks like it was reduced to 30 feet. And then in 1999, 2000, as the city was working on the Plan 2000, there was a proposal brought forward by the planning board at that point for, I believe it was 35 feet for residential and then 45 and 55 for multifamily and commercial. And that was ultimately withdrawn. Greg still has been trying to ferret out exactly what happened with that, but that was the last attempt as far as he can determine that a change in our height requirements was made. Again, to give you a little perspective on our height restrictions, our neighbors in Manchester, Essex, Beverly, Salem, Newbury are all 35 feet by right. In Newburyport and Marblehead, they split residential height between 30 and 35 feet, depending on what district you happen to be in. In Marblehead, they do limit building height to 30 feet in the harborfront, in our own harborfront, which is actually marine industrial. That limit is 40 feet here in Gloucester now. Comparable cities, towns down on Cape Cod, Bourne, Chatham, Dennis, Falmouth, Mashpee, and Sandwich are all 35-foot height. So we can go to the next one. That's just, again, a poorly coded, color-coded map of the region showing how height runs from 30-foot limit up through 41 plus, depending on where you happen to land in our region. We can go to the next one. And this is just an attempt at a plain language description of what the zoning amendments actually do. And again, we've got 9 amendments, but there are 6 actual changes to the zoning ordinance itself. The others are footnotes that refer back to these changes. So the first one, again, section 2.3.1 deals with the production of 2-family homes. And so what that does, the single change we're making in that is to remove the special permit requirement for conversion from an existing single-family home to a new 2-family home through exterior modification. And basically what that does is treats how we get to 2-family equally between new construction, interior conversion, and exterior conversion, so that how you get there is all treated the same. That brings us into compliance with Mass MGL 40A section 4, which says a city or municipality is supposed to treat the same use in the same district the same way, right? So if you're getting there by right with building new, then you should be able to get there by right with building an addition onto the dwelling, again, as long as you're compliant with all of the dimensional requirements, you're fitting in the building. And a discussion earlier, when with a friend on the planning board, happens to be on the call as we were discussing this. I made the comparison when we were talking about neighborhood review, that if you take the two family out for a second and you're just looking at single family, you can build a new, as long as you're compliant with all your setbacks, you can build a new two family or new single family by right. If you're going to modify an existing single family with an exterior addition, you can do that by right. No notification to your neighbors, no visit to the ZBA, as long as you're fitting within all your setbacks and buildings compliant, lots compliant, you're good to go. And that should be a similar case with how we're treating the two family parallel as well. If we're allowing two families to be built by right, two families, as long as they're compliant, no matter how they get there, should be treated the same. And so that's what that does. The second amendment actually allows for the by right conversion to an R5 to a 3-family unit. Right now, that is by a special permit from the ZBA. And it also changes the requirement in the R30 district. Currently, that is requires a special permit from the city council. And we are changing that to special permit from the ZBA to align with what's required in R20 and R10. Amendment 3 is the change in ordinance that I mentioned earlier that reduces the per unit lot size requirement in our larger districts, R80, R40, R30. Right now, current zoning requires that those lot sizes be doubled to accommodate a two-family home. We're removing that and reducing the per unit lot size to 1/2 of that overall lot size, so that, again, for example, I won't read through it, but R80 will satisfy it with 40,000 square feet per unit. Again, that's the only change there, except again, if somebody is exercising the 3-family conversion in an R30, then you'll note that the dimensions change for that as well at the end under R30. The 4th amendment is reducing the minimum lot width to coincide with the minimum lot frontage requirement. Currently, the ordinance requires for a little pregnant bulge in the lot. You'll see if you look at R80, minimum lot frontage is 80 feet, but the current minimum lot width is 100 feet. Similarly, there's a reduction in all of those, just to make carving up the lot a little simpler, because the requirement to do the bulge can make for some funky configurations of lots and placements of houses on those funkily configured lots. The 5th amendment we're talking about is an increase in the overall height limit to 35 feet from the existing 30 feet. That's for the initial one. Number 5 deals with 1, 2, and 3 family dwellings in the residential neighborhoods, all of the residential neighborhoods, plus CCD, which is the area around City Hall, and CB, which is principally Main Street and the upland side of Rogers Street. That's CB. And then Village Business is, again, there are a number of those spread throughout the city. But those currently allow residential use that corresponds with the neighboring residential district. So that would apply there. The 6th and final amendment recommended from the planning board is an increase for multifamily dwelling height. Again, currently it's 30 feet. The amendment proposes the increase for the residential neighborhoods R30, R20, R10, R5, and Village Business from 30 feet to 35 feet for multifamily dwelling units. And in the CCD and CB districts, again, those are downtown around City Hall, Main Street, bump that up to 45 feet for those. And that is to, again, accommodate mixed use residential where you would maintain retail or commercial space down below, and then 2 stories of residential use up above. And that's pretty much it for me, I believe. The rest of these slides, I will turn back over to Scott, because they contain the rather dry and boring language of the amendments themselves.
Thank you very much, Sean, for that presentation and your perseverance in this project. At this point, I think we'd like to go ahead and transition. Our agenda is for this meeting to end by 7:30, so we have another hour and a half. And we would like to hear from Ward 1 residents first and foremost. We're going to ask people to speak for not more than 3 minutes, addressing their concerns in favor, opposed, and why. We're going to ask people to just have one question or 1 3-minute question at a time, so everybody has a chance to speak. If there is an opportunity after Ward 1 residents have spoken, Ward 1 property owners or residents, we would then entertain questions from other folks throughout the rest of the community. But again, this forum is designed first and foremost to allow us to hear from Ward 1 residents about their concerns about how these proposed zoning amendments will impact us in our neighborhood. Is there anything else I should address, Jason, before we?
Should give their name and their address clearly so we can write those down for the record. And I'll be keeping time. And I'll just give you a little high side when you hit the 33-minute mark, not the 33-minute mark, the 3-minute mark.
Thank you very much, Jason. So Sherry's going to be recognizing people as they raise their hand. Hopefully everybody knows that function on the side of the control here to raise your hand. Just remember to put your hand back down again when you've completed your question. So Sherry, I see several hands up now. You want to begin to recognize and bring people in?
Going to start with Gordon Baird.
Gordon, welcome.
Okay, am I unmuted?
You are for a little while. As long as we can put up with us, we'll leave you unmuted.
Well, I will stay under my time limit, and I want to compliment Sean on his brevity, and that's the irony we both have the same cold. So anyway, I'm going to read my short speech and then ask a question that you can answer at your leisure.
Gordon, I should know it, but what's your address?
Yeah, Gordon Baird at 27
Fort Hill Road.
Hill Avenue. Yes.
Avenue, excuse me.
Yeah, thanks. And I am on the record, and I want to go on the record as being opposed to rezoning Ward 1, the most livable ward in the city, and in particular, Eastern Point, which, Scott, you showed it having zero effect in building. So why do it? And this is my 5th meeting. And in the first extremely well-run P&D meeting that really gave me hope, it was all about affordable housing, even on the slides. And that disappeared by the next meeting. So when I asked what is the real reason behind the plan, obviously to increase housing stock and density. And for what purpose? It will create more traffic problems, parking problems, water, sewage, sewer, and congestion problems, and less space, privacy, and livability. May I remind my Ward 1 neighbors what comes to your neighborhood when you upzone as proposed? Airbnbs. That's right, noise, parties, traffic, and everything. And lastly, don't you adore your neighborhood the way it is? I adore your neighborhood. I adore Greystone Road. I adore Fort Hill Avenue. I adore your streets and mine. Please don't ruin our superb ward and city, especially with no notice to neighbors on some of these new by right. But here is a question to consider. The chart that showed the non-compliant lots, which were about 75% of the lots, can one go before the Zoning Board of Appeals with a non-compliant lot and apply for a variance before they apply for a special permit if it's in RC 40? But can you all over the city go to the ZBA for a non-compliant lot the way you can now and ask for a variance? That is my question, respectfully submitted.
Thank you, Gordon.
You want to answer that?
Yeah. 2 things. Thank you, Gordon, for the questions. Number one, just to deal with the affordability question. Again, as I explained earlier, the planning board forwarded actual deed restricted affordable ordinance onto the city council last year. That was passed last fall. And that deals specifically with deed restricted, HUD recognized affordable housing that as levels mandated by the federal government through HUD, has a number of qualifications, limited purchasability because you have to qualify for the income levels. We do need that. We need far more than that. But what we also know from the housing production plan is that we need more moderately priced market rate housing. And that's what this does. And I know some people keep confusing affordable lowercase with large big A affordable deed restricted. So I'll start using moderately priced instead. And what I mean by that, again, and which is one of the reasons why we're targeting specifically conversion to two-family homes, is that back when we were working on that inclusionary zoning, in order to determine the potential for any payment in lieu of payment, Greg Cadamatori took a look at what housing valuations were at that point. And basically, they've increased a lot by now, but essentially my recollection is that the differential between a single family home and a comparable unit from a two-family home was in the neighborhood between $100,000 and $150,000. Meaning, so if we took today's median price in Gloucester, I believe the Times reported just recently that median price in Gloucester of a single family home is $500,000. So if that differential is roughly $150,000, that would mean the price of a unit within that newly converted or built two-family would be roughly $350,000. And while that $350,000 price might not qualify that unit as a deed restricted affordable unit under HUD, and also have no deed restriction on it, it's good because it's market rate, that is de facto more moderately priced, and to go back to using affordable, more affordable than the $500,000 purchase price of a single family home. So that's why we're targeting these conversions, two family specifically and three family, because they're on average, they're smaller, they're more compact, they're less costly to build, therefore less costly to buy. And again, therefore, whether we want to use more moderately priced or more affordable, small and affordable, that's the target there. The other question, I think, why target RC40? Not really targeting RC40. Basically, it was, as we're looking through this, it was today still the only district within Gloucester that was single family only. And I know just anecdotally over the last number of years that I've been involved in the planning board, hearing from friends on the zoning board of appeals, that one of the requests from RC40 is that they be allowed to create a guest home, being a single family only zone that was prohibited and still would be prohibited. There were ways to get around this, grandfathering an old carriage house, something like that. But if I don't know the status of your home, but if you were to come in and seek a variance from the ZBA to add a guest home today, as the zoning stands, the answer would have to be no. With this, you could create it. We also added last year, one of the other amendments we've put forward was for ADUs, accessory dwelling units. You could, assuming your lot's compliant, you could exercise that option to produce a guest house as well, or a house for family, et cetera. But with that ordinance, you're limited to 900 square feet or 2,500 or 25% of your existing main home. So that would be a limiting factor. Whereas with a two family, you're free to actually choose the size of any guest home or accessory home that you would like to build. So that's that. And I don't know if I missed a question that you had, but
Question was can if you have a non-conforming structure or lot, can you go to the ZBA for a variance for a non-compliant lot?
yes.
Yeah, that's what a ZBA is for, effectively. All right, this next caller.
Next is Deanna Fay.
Deanna Fay, name and address for the record, please.
Hi, Deanna Fay, 3 Barbary Lane, Ward 1.
All right, rock
Welcome.
on.
I just wanted to say that I see these proposed changes as a proactive approach to meet Gloucester's housing needs. There are needs that every city and town across the state are dealing with right now. So it's not a uniquely Gloucester problem. And there are so many examples around the state where communities are modernizing their zoning ordinances in an effort to promote housing equity and opportunities for more kinds of much needed housing stock. This is what this is about. And I am in full support of all of these proposed changes, including the changes to treat conversions and new construction of multifamilies the same. That's just smart. And the height increases to 35 feet because it's a practical and necessary design consideration for 2 and 3 family homes. I want to extend my gratitude to Greg Kadamatori, his staff, the planning department, to Sean, to all of the volunteers that have been working on this so diligently for quite some time. It's not a light lift. And it's just been a great deal of work, much of it done by volunteers. I have one point that I want to just make, and then I'd like Sean to respond to it, just for a bit of clarity, and to make sure that I'm not misunderstanding it, and to make sure others are not misunderstanding it. So, in order for any of these amendments that are proposed, in order for them to be applicable to a landowner or a developer of any kind, the existing home structure and the lot must be conforming and fully compliant with all other zoning and dimensional requirements. So, Sean, can you just take a minute and like reiterate or restate this in some way so that it is clear for all of us to understand? And thanks
Sure.
a lot for your time.
Thank you. Sure. Both the lot, as Deanna said, both the lot itself would have to meet all the dimensional requirements as described in our zoning ordinance for lot frontage, total square footage, ability to site a dwelling on it outside of any wetlands or any other thing on the lot that would prohibit the placement of the dwelling itself. And assuming that it has a dwelling on already, in order to exercise any of these rights, as in the conversion, the dwelling itself has to be completely 100% compliant within that, all those setbacks as well. Has to meet side yard, front yard, rear yard setbacks. If you're talking about a 3-family conversion, it has to meet the parking requirements, which again mandate that off-street parking beside or behind the building, not in the front setback for 3 families. So all of those requirements have to be met, along with all of the other check boxes throughout the Community Development Office, engineering, DPW, the Board of Health, if you're dealing with septic issues, which I know surprisingly there's still some areas out in Ward 1 and Ward 2 that are septic despite the sewer being fairly present. So septic issues, adequacy of access, not violating any easements, etc. So 100% complete compliance before you can move forward with any of these uses.
Thank you, Deanna.
Next is
Yeah.
Robert. Oops, excuse me. Next is Robert Gordon.
Robert Gordon, name and address, please. Robert, you have to unmute yourself.
Great. Okay, so 91 Eastern Point Boulevard.
Okay.
So good evening. First, a comment, and then I guess a question. Sean, I was on at the first meeting, and I asked a question about if there was any kind of environmental impact assessment done. Eastern Point has a pretty fragile ecology. Even some of the developed parts still host a whole variety of wildlife, and you had commented that no environmental impact assessment had been conducted, that was essentially the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission. which I fact checked, and the Conservation Commission doesn't get involved in doing environmental impact assessments. They're only engaged in enforcing zoning laws and existing conservation law. They don't do, so there has been no environmental impact assessment that's been done. And I think, another comment related to that would be, as we talk about increasing density on shoreline areas like Eastern Point, we have some very scary 10-year sea level and tidal surge forecasts for Gloucester. And I want to emphasize 10-year. We're not talking about 25, 50, or 100-year, because everyone likes to think about those things as, oh, they're so off in the future, far off in the future, and none of us will be around by then. We're talking about 10-year sea level tidal surge forecasts for Gloucester that are alarming. I mean, already every nor'easter does significant damage on Eastern Point to residence yards, roads, the sand dunes in the area, seawalls on Eastern Point, and now we're talking about increasing shoreline density on Eastern Point. And I guess this gets to a question. I'm trying to understand the 11 unit numbers for RC40, which you said were mostly Eastern Point. I think those numbers, this is a question, but I think those numbers are misleading, because what it doesn't take into account, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, is that potentially anytime a single family house on an appropriate square foot lot goes for sale, a developer could tear that house down and redevelop it into multiple residences, especially now with a smaller lot size. So the 11 number, I don't believe is accurate, because you could tear down an existing home on a single acre or multi-acre lot and then turn that into multiple residences, both single family and multifamily. So I don't think we're talking about just guest houses here. So as you can hear from my comments and question, I'm opposed to the proposals.
Yeah, for the, just to answer your question about the 11, I'd have to go to Greg for clarity on which of the 11 lots are compliant, because I know they're typically throughout Eastern Point specifically, and RC40 in general, the lots are often oversized and certainly more than the 40,000 square foot. And you're correct in that if somebody were to purchase, or actually somebody were to own one of these large lots and choose to subdivide it, they could actually go through the subdivision application process, at which point it would be subject to planning board review for the subdivision. Again, I don't believe all of or most of RC40 or the Eastern Point specifically is sewered. So somebody would have to come up with engineering designs for approved septic system for all of those, however many lots you produce out of, say, if you're producing 5 lots out of a 5 acre existing lot, you'd have to come up with all that engineering to support that. And again, yes, if your Concom does not do a environmental assessment, but if you're in any area that triggers, has wetlands, et cetera, Concom does have control over those things. But no, you're correct in your assertion that there could be subdivision if that happens.
So we're talking about a potential impact and development on Eastern Point that far exceeds what you've noted in the presentation. I think it's important for all Ward 1 residents to really understand the impact, because when someone is selling their home on Eastern Point, they could and leaving Gloucester, they could really care less about what the developer's plans are for it. So I think it's really important that everyone in Ward 1 really understands the potential impact to Eastern Point, the ecology of Eastern Point, the impact that we're going to see from sea level rise, the impact on the infrastructure, impact that the need for septics, and what already happens during storm surges, et cetera, that the impact to Eastern Point could be significant and far greater than what's in the presentation so far. Thank you.
If I could toss a point in there, I think that what Sean is saying is that, and you've asked the question about subdivision, Those are things that can happen now, regardless of whether or not a two-family unit by special permit goes into effect. And also the other thing that happens fairly
Well, the
commonly.
lot sizes are being reduced. I think that's the,
No, the lot sizes are not being reduced. You're still RC 40, which means that in order to have a compliant lot, you need 40,000 square feet. There's multiple lots on Eastern Point that are many acres and could absorb multiple units on multiple single units on those properties by subdivision, which is something that could happen tomorrow. The other thing that is happening with fairly good frequency is that people do come in, they buy the old Eastern Point homes, they tear them down, and they build much grander homes in their stead. And that's happening on a not irregular basis.
right. And now we're talking about not building much grander homes, but building multiple smaller homes and multifamily homes. And that's a completely different impact than a grander single family home.
But there actually, again, putting on that, there's no provision in either the existing zoning or in our proposed amendments to allow multifamily homes to go anywhere in RC 40. Our RC 40 would still be limited to single family home or a two-family home, which is an attached two-family home.
Right. And a
On a
two-family
single
home is a multifamily home.
Not by
Just
definition.
clear on that.
Not by definition.
Well, you can get into the semantics of the definition, but it's
No,
a multifamily home.
It's actually not a semantic issue. Two-family homes are considered two-family homes. The state considers multifamily at 4 units, not even 3, which is what we
Okay,
consider.
but that's just semantics.
It's
more
not
than one.
semantic.
It's more than one. It's more than one.
Well,
Thank you.
yes,
Thank you
but
for your
that's
time.
but that relative to what we're talking about, it matters.
Okay.
So shall we move on? Thank you, Gordon.
Next speaker is Richard Emanuel.
Welcome, Richard.
Richard, you have to unmute yourself.
Hello.
Well, welcome.
I'm concerned about the carrying capacity
Okay, just
and
Richard,
how we got to this process.
Richard, can we have your name and address for the record, please?
Yes, Reverend Richard Emanuel, 149, 153 East Main Street,
Thank you.
pastor of the church. I'm taking a religious point of view, not a business point of view.
Okay,
I'm
we got
not
3
gonna-
minutes to make it.
My concern is the carrying capacity. All of the planning, this is all wonderful writing and it's all with the best of intentions. However, until we look at the limits to growth, we have total examples of how we have failed in Gloucester. We have the loss of the state fish pier. We have urban renewal of the late 50s and early 60s that destroyed the center city. And we still have lots left barren, trying to figure out what we are supposed to do with those. The planning must be addressed on the level of what are the financial interests and who is writing the rules here. We saw the governor the other day mandate that all cities and towns on the rail lines have to meet a capacity. Then we are told, see, these things are all semantic. We're always told, wait in line. It'll get solved. And it doesn't happen. Well, the examples are the urban renewal. How did we lose control of the building of the Gloucester Crossing in 2007? Originally, that was a threat to put in a 40B project of 300 units. And the people said, no, we can't have that. Let's put a shopping center in. The shopping center then promised home care for the elderly, made all these promises. We have promised, and there's no follow through. There is no policing. There's no governance in the city. Anything goes and nothing matters. Now, this is all semantics, as we're being told to believe. The problem is we are addressing a series of overlays that get complicated. Nothing is simple in this. Nothing is thought out about what happens to the consequences. What are the end results? And is there a limit to the capacity? The city is going to have to replace the water sewage treatment. That's going to be a $500 million project. Already the council voted a temporary fix of $4 million to build a berm to protect the collapse of the sewage system of this community. This is not something that is going to happen tomorrow. Tomorrow is too late. And I'm always being like the wicked witch from the east telling, hey, look, and nobody looks. So look, if I was
Reverend?
yes, sir.
Can you wrap it up? You've had your 3 minutes.
All right, I'll just end it with a quote from Henry David Thoreau. Never look back unless you're planning to go that way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard.
Counselor Memhard, you have 71 attendees. The next one to speak is Masha Hart.
Welcome, Marcia. Name and address for the record, please.
Marcia Hart, 2 Fremont Street. Thank you for this process. And I'd like to say that I can really appreciate the efforts of the planning board and the housing production plan participants, and yet still end up disagreeing with a lot of the zoning changes that are being proposed. I'm really opposed to the height increase. I treasure the character of different Gloucester neighborhoods, and the height restrictions help to maintain the kind of layering of housing that we have, that our geography creates. And that allows a lot of modest homes to have some really beautiful natural views. It may not be a water view, it might be a wooded view. It may be a very small view, but it's an important view to that person. And that's a part of Gloucester's historic civic character, to allow everyone more of the beauty of an amazing place. The by right height increase will affect neighbors and abutters, and I just like the review process to remain in place at 30 feet, because people can appeal that. It gives the neighbors a chance to say how it may adversely affect them. And with it going higher, you start that appeal at a higher level. I have the same sentiments about the 1 to 2 family conversion. The expansion of existing structures should be a part of the review process still. Again, it allows neighbors to address the consequences and fallout from an expansion next door to them. I'm for 1 to 2 family conversions, and I'm for the accessory dwelling units. But I think that there needs that having conditions on them is not a negative thing. We're building too big. We're building in a way that isn't sensible for what's going on with our climate. We need to start zoning for our climate problems, to encourage smaller buildings, not larger, to reduce our carbon footprint rather than expand it. We need environmental impact assessments for all future development. There's no reason to allow building in flood zones any longer. We need to be encouraging those areas to be utilized as natural buffers to help to prevent damage to existing structures and infrastructure in the city. A good reason to raise the height is there are going to be many properties. I'm going to be one of them, I'm pretty sure, from what I've already seen happening in my neighborhood. That's going to, I've fallen into the flood zone already. It's a real economic problem for the people who live in the building that I'm in. We've been in that flood zone for, I don't know, 8 years, and it's going to go up again. And it's going to make where I live, which is an affordable property in a beautiful location, unaffordable to the people who are there. And so some people, my neighbor across the street is going to need to elevate. He got 9 inches of water in the storm of 2018 in his house. It's a regular occurrence in parts of our city, and we need to be planning for that. But we also do need to be planning for more housing. I would prefer that the city was concentrating on the, I don't know if it's the big A or the small A affordable, but the one that has deed restricted properties. That's why I'm still in Gloucester. I am incredibly grateful for my deed restricted property. And if you want a stable demographic in Gloucester and a diversity of population in a socioeconomic way, that's the way to have that happen. In terms of the accessory dwelling units,
Marcia, you need to wrap up a little bit. We've got you over 3 minutes
that's
now.
a really good idea, but Rockport is doing the same thing with 900 square feet, only they are requiring a 6-month minimum rental. And that's to discourage summer rentals, Airbnbs. Somebody yesterday mentioned, I think Santa Clara, it was 90 days. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marcia. Excellent points.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Pamela Steele.
Welcome, Pam. Name and address for the record, please.
Pam Steele, 10 Pilots Hill.
I know most of these addresses by heart now.
I would like to follow up on what I asked at the city council meeting on Tuesday. We were allowed to speak on our feelings about the project. You know that I've said it a lot. I can't see one reason for any of this. And secondly, when I asked if we could get some data, Sean is throwing out all this information with no data. The data I asked for was who in the water department can tell us what the future costs are going to be for all this extensive development potential. I mean, everything's data driven. A developer comes in and wants to know exactly what he can make on a property before he decides to come here or anywhere. So we should have this information. And secondly, we can't vote on this because people need more information and more time. This was not done properly. And it's an affront to me and other residents. As this is my 4th meeting. I'm not the only one, even though my address has been mentioned inappropriately. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Next speaker is
Scott, if I could I just quickly address the data issue she was asking about in terms of water?
Sure,
water
Sean.
capacity?
Please go ahead. I appreciate that.
Again, my understanding from going back to the housing production plan, when we were working on that, or the housing production plan review implementation working group, when we started determining the increase in housing that was required, again, roughly 650 units by a couple of years ago now at this point, the DPW was consulted about whether this posed a threat to our capacity. His answer then was just a simple no, but there was no request at that point for a formalized report or formal response to that request. I spoke with the mayor's office earlier in the week, and I believe they are working on producing a report that should satisfy this question about our carrying capacity, both in terms of water and sewer. And that's something that hopefully will be forthcoming by the time this gets to the council and the council itself is considering all this.
But if you don't mind, I would like to address something as the chair of P&D.
Please.
I hear the criticism regarding the process and whether or not this has been done correctly. And I get a little bristly at that because I really want people to understand that this didn't just pop up on the horizon suddenly out of nowhere. The planning board, which is an appointed body that meets on a regular basis with meetings that are noticed and attendable and on Zoom and are recorded, have been working on this for months and months. And in addition to all the other aspects of planning that they have been doing with the accessory dwelling units and the inclusionary housing regulations, all of these are publicly available meetings for people to go to. And some people have been to all these meetings. Now, once it got to the city council, we have made every effort to open up planning and development, not open up, they're always open, but to hold special meetings. We've insisted that we have ward meetings. We have let people speak repeatedly on the same issue and the same topic. And I just want people to understand there is nothing surreptitious about this process. It has been absolutely open. All of our information is available on the website. There is, in fact, we're making extra efforts to make sure that links are available, that people have this access to information. So, when you say that the process hasn't been followed, the process has been followed and is continuing to be followed. And it doesn't really move the argument forward to accuse people that it has not, because it really has. And I'm a stickler for process. I really, really believe that things need to be transparent and done properly. And I cannot tell you an incident in this process that I feel uncomfortable about.
So noted. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah.
Next speaker, please.
The next speaker has the initials TT.
TT, we need your full name and your address, please. When you unmute yourself. There you are.
There we are. Okay.
Your name and
Hi,
address?
this is Tom Todd, 4 Salt Island Road. I just wanted to talk about the height restriction, especially along the coastal area. It would be a real shame. There's a bunch of properties that are not the ones right on the waterfront, but are back from the waterfront, who get to see the ocean. But if you increase the height, then all of a sudden we're blocked, and we've been blocked for many years, especially when someone is rebuilding something that's in the flood zone, and like Florida have to put it up on stilts. That's a real challenge there. Obviously FEMA has regulations, and Gloucester has to, by a certain percentage, meet those regulations. So when you have a high wind zone or whatever, there's a lot of factors here. What I would like to see is that you not go to the 30, 35 foot, but you say, you have to have approval or agreement from neighbors, because you could really destroy the value of the property. And I'll leave it at that.
All right. Thank you very much. I just want to point out, and I think Sean can correct me on this, that the allowable height, whether it's 30 or 35, includes the piers that the building are constructed on, right? So it's that non-livable space is included in the 30 feet. So if you have 7 feet of pilings, then you've got 23 feet under our current regulations above that for housing, that you don't get 30 feet on top of whatever the pilings are, just regardless of what the height is. I think that's important to understand.
Correct. The FEMA advisement for whatever is below the livable space is included in whatever our total height limit is. At this point, it's 30 feet. So if it's a 7-foot flood zone you have to account for, then by default, the house could be no bigger than the 23 differential on that, unless they came for a special permit. At this point, either ZBA to get up to 35, or city council if they need something over 35. But whatever pylons or increased height for the flood zone is part of the total height. It's not separate.
I understand that. I guess the point I was trying to make is that that really, if you have to put it on pilings and you have that 35, then you have a very small amount of space you can actually build for living space, and then that makes it a real challenge for multifamily. And I hope that Gloucester will enforce the FEMA regulations and not let various people bypass them. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
just to add on to what Tom was asking about, and actually, I think Marcia got to it too. The motivation behind boosting from 30 to 35 feet was actually to accommodate things exactly like both of them are talking about. Marcia's dangerous flood area and Tom bringing up the flood zones as well, was that if we adopt a 35-foot standard, then that would allow homeowners that extra 5 feet to utilize for that increased height they need for the FEMA regulations. And it would standardize on that. I think the issue we've had in the past is that a homeowner can go to the ZBA or city council, get permission there to accommodate for that height, and then have that special permit, that variance be sort of negated by litigious neighbors who don't want to abide by that. So the bump to 35 was hoped that would accommodate these needs, both for the flood provisions that both of them are talking about, the FEMA provisions, and then getting back to Deanna, the design provisions for building a smaller footprint 2-family or 3-family home, so that those were sort of standardized across the board, and still in keeping, again, because we long existed without zoning and for a period of time had 35-foot by right, acknowledge that that's sort of our built environment, and 35 feet isn't unusual throughout town.
Thank you. Sherry, could you bring in our next speaker, please?
Next speaker is Mark Poulin.
Welcome, Mark. Address for the record.
Hello, can you hear me? Mark Poulin, 84 High Popples Road, Gloucester Ward 1. I want to present a couple recent cases to give people a visual of what I think is why the process isn't that broken. But I will concede a couple of my initial seconds to commend Jason and Greg and everybody that is, I do believe, doing a very robust process on this. Some of the data, as we pointed out, may not be exact, but I think the process and the transparency is very good. So I just want to say that. But you know, in terms of the process, so let me use the case example real quick of the back shore and the Ocean View Inn. It's right behind my house. Okay, here's a case where the process worked. Right, the developer bought, 5 acres, carved up some of it into 20,000 foot, approval not required, and built 30-foot houses, much to the pleasure of immediate abutters and things like that. Then he went and tried to build 35-foot multifamilies in the back. And again, the process worked. He read the writing on the wall. He could see how it was playing out. The neighbors, I counted 25 different houses that can see the tops of those buildings that are affected all the way through Links, up through Links, High Popples, all the way. There's about 25 houses that have to look at those units. And that's just one example of the process working, that he had to go in front of the city council. He had to do it. The neighbors objected and he backed off, and he said, and he's a nice guy. And he said, I sell square feet, right? And guess what? He is selling square feet, and he's going to sell them for $1 million. And if he had a few more square feet, they'd be 1.1 or whatever. So, I mean, the process does work. And another quick one, again, where it works is on 68 High Popples. A guy bought a house, carved it up into a 2-family, wanted to expand it and put 2 garages on it, making it a 105-foot long house. Okay. And the neighbors objected. They found that loophole. They found that thing where you couldn't expand it, expand. And we're like, great, thank God, we at least got that, because the rest of it was A&R, or by right, So the process isn't that broken. And the cases being made against 35, to me, I think are the weakest so far, right? We're almost giving them a lifeline ahead of any declared hardship, right? Okay, you want to build a house near a velocity zone or flood zone, you're going to have to give up the first whatever feet to FEMA and not build a 35-foot house. You're going to build a 23, so the process isn't that broken. It allows people to speak. And there might be an isolated case where no neighbors do object and it's all nobody's views being blocked or something. So the process isn't really that broken. There may be one, I think the pregnant lot one or something. But that brings me up to my question that I have. Will members of the public be able to speak in favor or opposition to each one of the 9 as they are being presented? So they can each motion one at a time?
I can answer that for you, Mark. Each motion was presented to us individually, so we will actually hold a public hearing on each motion so that we will have 9 public hearings. It's going to be a long night. I'm thinking right now, without having discussed this with the council president, that we take this up over 2 nights, because I think there's going to be a fair amount of attention at the public hearing, and maybe we do 3 the first night, 3 the second night. And as Sean pointed out, the remaining 3 really are textual changes in the footnotes that don't really, I don't know why, I don't actually know why you guys sent it forth as a separate amendment, but they're basically bookkeeping, editing issues. And if one of the amendments fails, then any footnote requirements that go along with it would by definition also fail.
Right. And just real quick too, we're doing all the CARP, the climate resiliency meetings right now. And it's like, Greg is in those meetings, Jem is in those meetings, city officials are in those meetings. And yet there's really no language in here about, maybe potentially some, initiatives, at least some, if some of these do pass, have some language in there to be LEED certified or, energy efficient in some way, or some, make it a little harder in some of these, if there's going to be some, give and take on some of the 9, to have climate resiliency built in, because you're right, more carbon, 2 furnaces is more, carbon footprint than 1, right?
Yeah, ice melt driveway, ice melt system at 1.8 million BTUs. Anyway, thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you.
If I could just interject quickly why other things like climate resiliency and energy efficiency isn't in those. It's because these are more use rights and dimensional requirements. They don't deal with those codes. It would be more about the building of the environment, or the building of the structure, not actually the permitting process for it. So that other thing, those other issues could be part of a different process to require those.
Right. Thank you, Mark. Scott, we've got about 6 people who want to speak and about half an hour left in our time. So we're doing well, I think.
I think we're looking good.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the diversity of questions and the clarity of people's efforts to answer them and address them as we go along. So thank you all. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Sharon Bragg.
Welcome, Sharon.
Hi, Sharon Bragg, 6 Terrace Lane. I'm opposed to the height increase, and it's because I understand we don't have a right to a view, but many people have purchased homes that look over other homes and have a view. But we've purchased the home with the assumption that that view is going to remain because of the current zoning laws. However, this change would allow the houses that are all along East Main Street, Rocky Neck Ave, I guess Salt Island, Eastern Point Boulevard. So those waterfront homes can all go up. And I think, and this was an issue on East Main Street when that one house, he built above the height and the neighbors all complained and he had to take it down. Well, now that house and many other houses like that could go up higher, and it would, increase the value of the person who's going to build up higher, but it decreases the value of all the homes that are behind it. And we bought homes with the assumption that we have this view, it's going to stay the same. But now that view is, and,
Sharon,
and
we lost you a little bit there. Sorry.
Okay. The view, the height increase, you got, am I back?
You're good. We got you. It decreases
The height
value
increase would affect the property values, the home value. Yes. So one person's property value goes up, another person's property goes down.
Right.
And that person whose property goes down has no say in it, no recourse. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okie dokie.
Next person to speak is Peter Coakley.
Welcome, Peter.
Hi, can you hear me?
Your
We
address
can.
for the record.
Okay, it's Peter Coakley, 20 Eastern Point Boulevard. I've been there for 20 years, but been in Gloucester as a resident for 45 years. And I love Gloucester. If I could only live one place in the world, it would be Gloucester. So whatever any of you, first of all, let me just say to Jason and Sean, yes, I appreciate the massive amount of work and hours I can see that you put into this. I mean, thank you very much. But I don't see anything here on any of them that makes Gloucester a better place. When I drive a person around Gloucester who's never been to Gloucester, the reaction always is, oh my God, this place is so congested. There's one house on top of the other one. And now we're talking about taking one of the most beautiful neighborhoods in this beautiful city and changing it all of a sudden. And I think increasing the density is not going to do anything to enhance Eastern Point or enhance Gloucester. And I really think it'll do the opposite. The 100 homes that are out on Eastern Point pay, I forget the percentage, but it's a really large percentage of the Gloucester tax base. And I think all this is going to do is decrease the values of those properties. Out there, some of the streets are ridiculously narrow. They're below the floodplain. 90% of the homes are on septic systems. Most of them are really old. And I really think there's no question increasing density would have a huge negative environmental consequence. Also, you know, they're private roads. The residents pay quite a bit. Every home pays quite a bit each year for their plowing and their security. And now you're just saying, let's put some extra burden on the residents that are maintaining the roads that Gloucester doesn't have to do anything for. So I just think it's a really terrible idea to make Gloucester try. I don't get it, really. Let's get some more houses in Gloucester. So thank you for the work you do, but I'm very strongly opposed to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Thanks, Peter. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Rob Culbert.
Welcome, Rob. Address for the record.
Thank you. Rob Colbert, 90 Eastern Point Boulevard.
Thank you.
So Peter stole all my thunder. I couldn't agree with him more. I appreciate all the work that's gone into this, but as a member of the Association of Eastern Point Residents Board and the amount of time we spend dealing with the roads, the storm damage, the security issues around getting emergency vehicles in and out because of the roads not conforming to standards. Very much opposed to anything that would add density to RC40. I think everyone else has made very good points about it, but really it would really be just a further burden that would just be really difficult and cause problems. I also am opposed to the height change because my experience is that you can get a 35-foot variance right now almost every time, and that seems to be pretty standard. So my fear would be is nothing changes, as you've said. 75% of the homes in the entire city are non-conforming. You have to go through a special permit process for, it feels like, just about everything. And so the reality is, if you told me, hey, great news, we're gonna have a rule and we're gonna stick to that rule. So it's 35 feet. So in my case, I did get a variance for my home 11 years ago. And it's because my front yard was higher than my backyard. So I lost 3 feet because of the difference of my walkout basement. So I needed the variance in order to be able to put a reasonably pitched roof on my home. So I think I have a 32-foot variance, just so I could get that in. If it was 30 foot on top of the top spot, I would have had no issue. But the reality is now what you're doing is 35 is great. If there's, never going to be an ability to go above that, which is never going to happen, then I would say, great, to get everybody out of business, go into all these meetings, trying to get these variances because you've made it nice and easy. 35 is it, but it's not going to be it. It's not going to change anything. So for that, I think 35 to 40 is definitely going to cause neighbors beauty blocks. It's going to cause contentiousness amongst neighbors, and it's really going to be, in my opinion, it's just going to exacerbate a problem that exists today. So my preference, given there's no change in how you're able to get a variance for stuff, that you don't change that.
Okay.
And Scott, can I just quickly address Rob's question? Because I think it's or his statement, which I think is very good, but just to correct the assumption that if we grant 35, the ZBA will be granting above that, and that's not the case. The ZBA is basically, with this amendment, the ZBA will be removed from the height equation completely. And to go anywhere above 35, you'd be going to the city council. And the notion, actually, to get at what you were talking about, we have a lot of people that go through the ZBA process now to get to 35. Some are lucky, like yourself, exercise it, able to actually utilize the permit. There are others in town that aren't. And again, the move to 35 was to address these needs, which are evident based on the large number of applications we get to the ZBA for that some flexibility between 30 and 35, and that by doing this would create a uniformity of 35 at that point for people who needed to go up to it. And a lot of people talk about this is going to, people are going to be bumping up 5 feet across the city. It's very expensive to actually do any construction work right now. I don't think anyone's going to be doing a bump of 5 feet on the roof line just because they could at this point. And the 35 would establish sort of a new baseline where even the city council could point to when those people come in and say, I need a 36 or 37 foot bump. They can more easily point to say, look, you've got 35, that should be workable for you. So there's less of a controversy over anything above that. So again, that's just not to discount what you're saying. I understand completely, but again, just to try to explain some of the reasoning why we opted to put forward the 35-foot change.
And again, Sean, I don't disagree. And if 35 was 35, it would make sense. It would reduce a ton of work with the city and save a lot of neighbors unnecessary infighting over that five feet. But I think you've just bumped the 5 feet up to 35 to 40. If it's not the case, that would be great. But that's my experience has been that what setbacks and height requirements that seem to be fixed to protect neighbors, somehow there's a way to get around them. And neighbors don't always have the ability to dictate building process of their neighbors. So that's I do appreciate it, but again, main concern is the density with Eastern Point is just a killer. It really takes up a ton of our time, and its security is constantly a concern around getting those emergency vehicles down to the lighthouse when the flooding's taking place and it's below sea level.
Very good. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Rob.
The next speaker is Mary Ann Boucher.
Welcome, Mary Ann.
Thank you, Scott. Mary Ann Albert Boucher, 93 Mount Pleasant Avenue. I just would like to give an example. First of all, I've been to all these meetings because I care about our entire city, not just the ward that I live in. I owned a home in another ward. It was a 2-family home. The first floor consisted of 4 rooms. and there were 2 adults, 1 small child, and 2 cars. The second unit was an 8-room apartment, 2 adults and 3 teenagers, also with 2 cars. Within a short amount of time, the 4 cars, which I had enough room for parking, suddenly turned into 7-car parking. I'm not going to go on with everything that everybody else has said, but I just want that to be taken into consideration, that I listened to our council members pleading for our roads to be taken care of. I'm highly concerned about our roads in the city and what the additional building will do. I look at Thatcher Road. Thatcher Road, the condos are going up left and right. I saw the Briar Neck group a few years ago tried to buy that property to save that area because of the marshes. And now we have E. coli issues over there. I worry about the height. I'm opposed to the height. I just watched a major project that was 30 foot, zoned for 30 feet, and now it's part of it is 56.5 feet tall. That went through. I just want to say that we are here and we may be at every meeting, and you may know our address as well by now, because we care as much as you do. So thank you very much.
That was actually a positive thing, Mary Ann, in knowing the addresses. Nice to see the people participating in these meetings.
Mm,
And thank you for your involvement, Mary Ann,
Thank
and your
you.
contribution.
thank you.
The next speaker is Clyde.
Hi, I'm clicking the unmute button. Am I being heard?
You are.
Fantastic. Hi, Jason.
Hi there, Clyde. Oh, hey, Clyde. Sorry.
So Clyde Gillard, 22 Eastern Point. I've tried to make all the meetings, but I've been to 2. And I'm trying to keep up. And I know this is complicated and there's a lot of detail. But I do have to say, to someone's point earlier, I do feel maybe these meetings are available, Jason, but it seems to me the message has changed. The first meeting I attended, I thought it was all about affordable housing. And that's something I can get behind. This doesn't feel that way to me. This feels development. This feels changing the character of Gloucester. So, so first of all, I'm opposed to what it is what's on the proposal. And second, in the first meeting, when I heard Sean and whoever else speak, it seems to me that there is a process that is followed right now that allows for variances or changes. So, and the numbers that I thought I saw when we talked about last, there weren't hundreds of applications indicating to me that there was a significant issue or problem. There was 10s or 20s of applications for variances or changes. So it seems to me we're trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist, and we're risking our environment, and in particular about Ward 1 where we live. I'm surprised and frankly concerned that there is no impact study being done, because these changes do impact Eastern Point, where our roads are some below sea level, where we're not like some of the other towns that Sean mentioned as comparisons. This is shoreline living, and it's a different environment. So I think that these changes would have dramatic impacts. And if nothing else, before anything should be passed or considered, there ought to be some consideration for how this impacts our shoreline, our neighborhood, the views that we have, the facilities that we have here. So I'm a little disappointed and certainly opposed to any of these changes until someone can tell us that there's, there really is a long-term, I think it was Bob Gordon said it earlier, 10 years is, that's the long horizon. So, and we ought to be looking much further than that down the road. So I appreciate the time and the effort you guys put into it. I was the secretary of the Eastern Point Association for 12 years. So I do have, as someone spoke earlier, some experience to the traffic, and it was not good then. The woman that just spoke with having 2 cars turn into 7 cars, that's the kind of scenario that we are inviting by some of these changes. So, so that's registering my thoughts. Thank you for working so hard and so long into the night. And I'll stop talking now.
Right,
Scott,
thank
could I
you.
just make a quick clarification? Because I think Clyde mentioned it, and several other people from out on Eastern Point have mentioned it. I just want to make sure it's understood that the proposal for RC40, which is predominantly Eastern Point, that on the other side of Farrington Avenue and out along the Magnolia Shore a bit, is only to allow two-family via special permit through the ZBA. It doesn't, it's not opening a door to any by right development. Any proposal that happened out there would have to go through the ZBA process, neighborhood input, et cetera. And it's, again, going back to the chart, and I can clarify for this how we got to such a low number, hopefully by the time P&D gets to this, but it's, there are only 11 compliant lots as it stands that would be able to exercise this special permit option. And again, they would have to do so meeting all of the other requirements of adequate septic. And if you are on a septic system, I talked to the health director about this. It's not an easy process to convert from single to two because that triggers a whole nother layer of a shared system. It's not an easy get, and I don't anticipate it actually adding a lot of units. That's really not the focus. I don't think there's going to be, as Gordon said earlier, I don't think there's going to be any affordable units developed on Eastern Point. It was put in as an amendment to allow the possibility of a resident in RC40 if they chose to try to build a two-family home. And again, going back regarding the presentation, I tried to correct earlier that if there was a miscommunication in that first presentation that we were talking about deed restricted affordable housing with these ordinances or with these amendments, that was a miscommunication of some sort, because as I said earlier, we dealt with inclusionary zoning, which is specifically deed restricted housing, with our amendment that was passed by the city council, the new inclusionary zoning amendment passed by the city council last spring. And this has always been about more moderately priced market rate units also, which I don't expect to appear out on Eastern Point or the back shore or anywhere like that. We're really targeting more modest homes, current single family homeowner who decides to add an addition to either supplement their covering their mortgage, supplement their retirement, provide housing for a adult child or housing for senior parents, to provide that. And to a lesser degree, hopefully increase some of the more moderately priced rental stock. But again, we weren't targeting RC40 for either affordable housing or greater development. It was just sort of bringing them mildly in line in terms of that special permit ability for them to exercise it if they want. My anticipation is that no one out there wants to build a two-family home. So that's
an assumption. I would also say that I'm not sure why you have to reduce the lot size by 40 square feet to 20 square feet. And if the impact is only 11, then why bother at all? Why not handle it through the process that already exists?
Now, there's no reduction in lot size for RC40. I think
I'm sorry. Well,
There's
that's on your slide, right? It went from a 50% reduction in lot requirements from 40 square feet to 20.
that's R40, not RC40.
And Clyde, that has to do with how much land you have to have for each unit within that lot. So you would absolutely have to have 40,000 square feet with 20,000 per house on that lot. You're not reducing the size of the lot. You're just reducing right now. In order to have a two-family in a 40,000 square foot lot, you actually have to have 80,000 square feet. You have to have 40,000 for each unit. And this just brings it halves the amount of land you have to have per unit, but you still have to have a 40,000 square foot lot.
Sure. It encourages further development in density.
Yes.
So I don't want to argue on semantics, but the
that's
impact
why
is
we're
exactly
here.
the same. Right.
We're trying to encourage some more density because we have a housing issue. We have a housing crisis. And the crisis is not just in affordable housing, it's all the way up through the market rate. So yes, we are trying to encourage the opportunity for people to convert their homes to a 2-family, and in some cases 3-family, because we have a need for that kind of housing.
So this is a pro-building development proposal.
It's
It is a
pro-housing development proposal.
pro-housing development. I mean, again, most of, as Sean's pointed out multiple times, most developers aren't interested in coming in and converting an existing home into a 2-family. There's not enough margin in it for them. This is really geared towards easing the process for existing homeowners to convert their property for whatever reason, whether they want to create a unit for a family member, or if they need to create a unit for rental unit, whatever. I mean, that's how it actually ends up being used, is really geared towards the idea that that person gets to stay in their house and has a supplemental unit for whatever reason, whether it's family or rental or whatever. And yeah, we are trying to encourage that, but that's not I mean, we've had developers come on these meetings and explain to us that these don't help them. They can go out right now, if they chose, buy a house, tear it down, build 2-family by right. They don't have to mess with any neighborhood input. They don't have to mess with the ZBA. That is a by right usage, as long as they comply with all the other rights. If you're a homeowner and you want to do the same thing and you want to bump out your house a bit to accommodate it, you have to jump through the hoops. So we're actually treating our existing homeowners more diligently and more aggressively with the process than we would be these outside developers that keep coming in, in and doing this. So it levels the playing field, frankly, for the people who are here and want to remain here.
Yeah, I don't see it that way, but
okay.
I'd love to talk to you further about it, because when you see what they did where the Windjammer was, or Cappuccino's, and how they stuffed apartments in there, that's just poor. And to me, that's exactly what could happen. And then when you reduce the land requirement, someone would knock down the house and have the ability to build twice as much. So I think that you're looking at it through Pollyannic eyes, saying everybody would want to do the right thing. But if you allow these rules and the regulations to go through, then people will do whatever they're allowed to do. And to the person earlier, 35 feet means 40 feet. It isn't a hard line in the sand. So
let me ask you, if I can, Clyde, because I appreciate this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
What's your suggestion to easing our housing crisis when we have a relatively high mean housing price? Young families can't afford to stay here. They can't even come here. A lot of seniors are now taking advantage of selling their house and moving into Halyard and other places because we have those options available to them now. But what's your answer to easing the housing crisis? And I'm not just talking about affordable housing, capital A. I'm talking about housing that your daughter or my daughter might want to avail themselves of, if they wanted to come back to Gloucester, but can't, because those opportunities aren't available to them. Where do you see this being resolved?
Yeah, so I mean, there's two questions. There's stock and there's cost, right? So on the cost side, to me, the reason we have our house and the reason our neighbors have their house is because the people that had it for 40 years couldn't afford to live here any longer because the taxes went up too high. So, if you want to provide affordable housing, I would start with tax credits to folks that have multiple housing opportunities, that you provide them an incentive to lower the cost of their house so people can live there. That's one answer. The other answer in terms of the stock, I mean, I haven't given it a lot of thought, but I would love to have an active debate about it. What I don't think is the right answer, at least for the ward that I live in, is to increase the density when we're still worried about whether our roads are going to be flooded, whether our septic systems will work, whether the traffic patterns can be maintained, right? I mean, and to not have any environmental impact on the decisions that will increase the density it doesn't seem to be responsible to the area that we love so much, right? So how do we figure that out? I mean, at whatever time it is right now, I don't have an answer, but I'm certainly more than willing to, ideate on the idea on the problem. It is a problem, but one size doesn't fit all, right? And so having peanut butter policies come across all of Gloucester and our ward with these regulations for height and for changing these restrictions, I don't really see where that solves the problem. And your own math says that, and I don't believe that number 11, I think there's a hole in that number, but really if the answer is really 11, then it really is, it is not helping your challenge and your problem at all. to do any of this Ward 1 restructuring. It doesn't address the issue whatsoever. So why do it?
Well, we don't change zoning by wards. We change it by district. So we have to consider.
Oh,
the
by
changes.
district, sorry. RC
Right, RC 40.
40. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't give you anything. That doesn't put any money in your pot. That doesn't put any housing in your plan. That doesn't increase your stock. Given your goals that you stated, there's zero impact. And yet it's causing controversy here, right? As you heard with earlier speakers. So.
Okay. All right.
I'd like to ask that we move on. Clyde, I appreciate your.
I am sorry for the extra time. I appreciate
No,
it.
I asked you questions. I think it's fair.
This is a great discussion and I appreciate your thoughtfulness on it. And we still have 5 or 6 people in line to speak. So I just want to make sure we get to them. Thank you.
Next speaker is William Nardone.
Welcome.
Sorry.
Thank you. My name is Monica Nardone, and I live at 2 Rocky Pasture Road. And I wanted to thank all of you for your work and effort and also for holding all of these meetings. This is my first time participating. I was very impressed when you listed the stakeholders that participated in the planning and development process. I think I did have some reservations going into this meeting. I think by and large, my reservations I've been reassured about the plan overall, and I think that there are many positive aspects to the plan. I think that it's really important to think about our seniors, the sons and daughters of our moderate and middle-class income families who can no longer afford to buy in Gloucester and have to go further out. So there's any number of stakeholders here whose voice by and large hasn't been represented in this Ward 1 meeting. And I think it's important that we take the need to address the housing needs of all of our residents, and particularly the small A affordable housing units, as well as the moderate income housing units. So thank you, everybody, for your hard work.
Thank you very much, Monica.
Oh, I actually had a question just for clarification. I understand that when you have a multi-unit house or a 2-family house, you need to provide parking on the side or in the back. My question is, do you need to provide parking at all?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
So the question, I understand that there are provisions so that you aren't able to provide parking if you have a 2-family or 3-family house in the front. Do you need to provide parking at all?
Yes.
Yes.
So for example, for the downtown, where we will be increasing the density quite a bit with this plan, I mean, some of those houses don't have existing parking already. So is that non-compliant and they wouldn't be able to increase the size?
Yeah, they're currently non-conforming, pre-existing non-conforming. So
This would not give them opportunity for growth. No.
Okay. All right. That's really helpful to understand. Thank you.
Thank you for calling, Monica.
All right. Gordon's already spoken once. Maybe we'll get on to Michael Slezak.
Yeah. Michael Slezak is next.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Michael Slezak, 10 Brace Cove. And as a former planning board member, I appreciate all the time that you put in the evenings. And however, I think to look at this as just a dimensional issue, as one of the previous speakers mentioned, is short-sighted. I think we need to take a more comprehensive view, given what we know. Because we don't just have a housing crisis, we have a world environmental crisis. And I think I would like to see you keep the review process for changing any existing lot from single to 2 or to 3, and add an environmental component so that they get to the point of addressing our environmental issues as well. I mean, in terms of zero carbon or reducing carbon footprint. It's not just a question of dimensions, it's a question of the environment. And I realize that your silo is dimensional and that the environmental people deal with environment and the health department deals with Title V. But I think we need a more comprehensive review process to begin to add density to the housing stock throughout Gloucester. I live in Eastern Point, but my issue is with the entire city that you need to, I think, and the country to deal with these issues as we face the rising sea levels and environmental catastrophes that we're seeing throughout the country. I don't want to take any more time.
All right, that's very, very, very thoughtful. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Next is LJ.
Hi, Lisa Rigsby, 3 Taylor Court. I am a Ward 2 resident, but I border Ward 1. And I first want to thank Councilor Memhart, because you are now a tightrope walker, balancing very different needs in very different wards. It's been really interesting to listen tonight, and I was able to listen in on another ward meeting slightly, but this particularly impacts me, especially as I have spent a third of my life in Ward 1, and I do understand some of the issues and comments that were raised tonight. I just have to start by saying, and again, Mr. Henry, thank you so much, that the comments regarding the MBTA community and TOD initiatives, I don't understand why there is a continual refusal to address this. I've actually gone to other communities like Newton, Ipswich, Rockport, Reading, Hamilton, and everybody is sort of integrating. Everyone's, our entire state are making zoning changes right now, and it's part of the conversation. And I still don't understand the reticence in bringing these two things together. I agree so much with what I believe it was Councilor Gross said. This has been going on for years. Yes, we see the 2017 plan, housing plan. There's been Gloucester Daily Times articles. We see it all, but it actually comes together in discussions that are happening right now. And I don't understand the reticence in talking about it. So
I can address part of that, Lisa. Part of the reticence is that the process for the rezoning came to be through the planning board and also through the city council well in advance of the TOD announcement that was made at the state. And the state is still in the listening stage of what they're planning. So frankly, that TOD affects, the relatively core of Gloucester in terms of being right around the railway station. These other issues are citywide, and not that there isn't some impact of the TOD potentially in downtown, but we're talking about a much broader issue and broader uses that have nothing to do with the TOD right now. And even so, even if we made all these changes, they all went through tomorrow, that the TOD is not a mandated zoning requirement. We have, as a city, need to figure out whether it's worth it to us to engage. We also need to find out, and the planning department is working on this, to figure out whether or not we already comply, depending on the density and where we draw these lines. So we are going to be having a meeting. We've just asked the planning board and the city council to have a joint meeting with an update from Greg Catamatori probably the very, very beginning of March, to give us a general overview and update as to what's happened, because things have been changing even from the, when it was first announced, and public comment has caused some adjustments in the state's thinking. So comment period ends at March 31st. We have to have a public meeting of some sort on this by the beginning of May 2nd. The actual implementation of the TOD doesn't even take effect until the end of 2024. So we're trying to resolve these short-term, they're not short, they have long-term consequences, but these issues that we're dealing with right now, we feel have to be resolved regardless of where we go with the TOD, if that makes any sense. It's not that they're not completely separate, it's just that they're not completely joined either.
Thank you so much for that. And I mean, I do understand what you're saying, but the TOD study happened in conjunction with our 2017 housing production plan. So that also has been going way back. If you look at that plan, which Mr. Henry was involved in, they're sort of intertwined. And
are you referring to the 2013 study that
2016 or 2017 production plan? It was in conjunction with the TOD study. I read it myself, and it talks a lot about by right, and that is something that blanketing over all of our zones we're talking about. And I'm not saying that impacts every single zone, every single ward in our city, but it all comes together. The need for more housing, which nobody disputes.
I'm not so sure about that.
Well, some people may, but in general, most people agree that based on the way our populations are, the availability of housing stock, how we need more senior housing, more moderate housing. It all kind of comes together. And what I've seen in other municipalities is a broader discussion that incorporates this. And I do think it's a shortcoming of our city, and it's creating unnecessary friction.
Well, I think we should move on, but I see your point. But I think the other thing to consider is that, we like to think that we can create zoning that is static and will serve our purposes on into the future. And the truth is that our needs are constantly evolving. The reality of our world constantly evolves, and we have to allow our zoning to evolve with it. Otherwise, we're going to, if we do absolutely nothing ever, we will get into a situation where we have absolutely no housing that's affordable to anybody but very, very wealthy, or maybe the very, very poor, because we're gonna create a gap in the middle that is not going to be filled. And that's going to have tremendous consequences to the character and the very existence and soul of Gloucester. So, we're not in a position where we can't just not do something. We have to constantly be monitoring how this impacts, what the effects are long-term, and where we have to adjust. And if we don't change, if we don't respond to that, we're really, really going to mess with ourselves.
I completely concur, because I am the moderate person.
Yeah.
I live in Ward 2, bordering Ward 1, which is why I'm on this call tonight. And I can't sell because I can't move anywhere.
I'm not laughing. I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing because that is a major, major problem for people.
I totally agree. But the concern is, and I have this conversation with my partner nearly on a daily basis. And, I'm not asking the city to pay for my psychology counseling for couples.
That's a different board.
But when it's left up to, when I see sort of the development and regeneration that's happening in my ward, it's not, there's the low income, and then people who sell and they're cashing in. And it's not necessarily people who are trying to expand to keep elders like in-house, right? To age in-house or to accommodate young people. It's like sell and get out, make the money. And I don't know, I think like developing moderate housing is kind of a different kind of conversation, because it doesn't matter. We see what happened on Thatcher Road and those 3 developments that went up, and the developers were forced to create a small percentage of affordable unit, but everyone wants to cash in. I've seen it on Wheeler's Point, where there's like been an old house somebody sells and then it's condoed, or Ferry Hill, Wolf Hill. I move around a lot on this island, but I've also seen a development where a friend had that very purpose and went through the zoning process and now accommodates her aging parents, herself, and a sibling who could not ever afford to buy in the city. And it went through a process that was, I feel like, right, sort of righteous in a way. Like that's the purpose of zoning, and that's the purpose of our ZBA. If we just blanket and make it, we're going to see people just selling, and then it's going to go at market. And I'm not sure it's going to create a moderate housing opportunity for me. That's all. Okay, I know it's going on, but I
Lisa,
also,
if you could do me a favor and contact me, my number is on the website. My email is my name. Contact me and let me know what it was you're reading that you see a correlation between the MBTA and what the housing production plan was. I'd love to know that.
Offline.
Okay.
And I'd
I'll
love to
do that. Yeah, definitely offline.
And I'd love to talk to you more at length later about this.
We have one speaker left who hasn't spoken.
Okay.
I think, should that be it?
Thank you, Lisa.
Peggy Lou.
Peggy Lou.
Peggy Lou.
Hi there, I'm Peggy Cullen Matlow, 10-Way Road. I don't have a lot to add. People really covered all the ground. I guess I am against these proposals, and my biggest issue is the traffic congestion, the condition of our roads, which is, I mean, I go down Brightside every day. It's like a trail. It's just horrendous. Beach Street, Moreland, these are my roads. I busted out 4 tires a few years ago on Beach. I mean, and I understand there's this issue with private roads and public roads, but to add more traffic on these roads, Way Road is falling into the swamp. I mean, it's just literally crumbling away. And, you know, it's a private road. We're going to have to fix it. It's not going to happen. So I think that has to be addressed before we start adding more housing density, and also the sewer system. I mean, we have a very antiquated sewer system here. We have, you know, I think maybe the only one in the state, I think, that has the single process instead of the double. So I just feel like we're not ready to add more density. I really feel like there's other questions that need to be addressed before we go forward. And I'm also curious, it seems like I get a feeling from Jason for sure that you're definitely for these proposals, and I'm not really sure where Scott stands, but I'm just curious, you know, does a conversation like this sway you at all, or do you just go through with, you know, your stance, or how does that work?
You know, I'm participating because I'm very interested in what people have to say, and
we're definitely listening.
I do have viewpoints, and I'm not going to shy away from the fact that I'm the reason I ran for city council in the first place was because we have a terrible, affordable, lowercase a problem. And I look at my children who are now in college and graduating and realizing that not only could I not afford to move here based on what the cost of the properties are, my children can't come back to the house, to the community that they grew up in. And I think that is a real tragedy when you think about what people talk about as the character of Gloucester, is the long-term generational roots that have been developed here. It's not just the pretty landscape. Let's be honest with you. You can get pretty landscape all up and down the coast. Okay. I lived in California. You got pretty landscape all over California. It's not just the pretty landscape. It's the people who are here. And if we can't preserve the folks who live here, who make Gloucester what it is, then really what's the point? Because you can have Martha's Vineyard here if you want to. It'll probably be about 15 or 20 years, and we'll lose a lot of the character that makes Gloucester who it is or what it is. So that's my position. And
I agree with, I'm sorry.
no,
I
I just feel that even incrementally, if we can make changes that encourage the development of some modest housing, which is, there's been a lot of focus on Eastern Point, and I think Sean was correct to say, the reality is there's probably not going to be much change on Eastern Point. Though, to be fair to the rest of the city, Eastern Point should not be immune from accepting some responsibility for the overall housing needs, even at that level. But we have got to make some incremental change moving forward. And what we've been hearing by and large is people really upset about the idea of this stuff happening in their neighborhoods. But there are 2 families and 3 families literally everywhere in the city, everywhere. And I just don't think that the reality is I don't think that people are going to see this massive explosion of growth. We're going to see subtle changes and additional units popping up here and there. And that will serve a purpose towards getting us towards the goal of keeping people in Gloucester. It's not the full answer, but I think it's one that adds just incrementally to our housing stock in a way that doesn't, we're not looking at throwing, Beverly-sized giant units downtown. But if we wanted to solve our housing crisis, that's what we should do.
But we also have a traffic crisis, and we also have a sewer crisis.
You know
And I
what?
think we need to
Everybody
look
has
at those
a
before we-
traffic crisis. I mean, that's not unique to Gloucester.
Well, although we are an island and independent
Right.
that way,
Yeah.
but
And we have bad roads. I mean, worse than anywhere I've ever been. I really appreciate the span of income in Gloucester. It's one of the beauties of our community.
Yep.
The width and breadth of our community is what makes it so beautiful. But I just feel like we're putting the cart before the horse here. We have other problems. We just had a 2-family house developed in our street. It was by a developer. One went for 1.8 million and one went for 1.5 million. And this was a 2-story, condo thing that went up, and one went up on Bass, and they sold for, these things look to me like they're selling for over $1 million or $900,000. They're not exactly affordable.
But I would say those are the ones that are being developed by right now. And part of the proposals is to allow the conversion of some existing homes to 2 families are going to be less likely to be in that range. I'm not saying promising, but based on what we've seen in the real estate market, it's far different to get an upstairs unit in a single family to go for that same kind of level as a duplex side by side. But we're getting into the weeds here.
Yeah.
I think we both understand where we're coming from, though.
Yeah.
I agree about the roads, especially Brightside.
Me too.
Yes. All right, we're at 7:45. Scott, it's your call.
I know Gordon has his hand raised, but he's spoken before.
Okay, as well.
I see Gully, James Hand. You'd like to speak?
We have 2 more at 3 minutes and then call
Yep.
it. Okay,
Yes,
James
please.
Hand is a 917.
Scott, this is Gully Hand. James Hand. I own property at 36 Rocky Neck Avenue and 36R Rocky Neck Avenue. And no, I've been following this since I learned about it, which was either at the very end of December or early in January. And I have attended one other live meeting, but I watched the tapes of all of these ward meetings. It's been really interesting. I've done a lot of thinking about this, and I do have some comments. There have been some very eloquent people who have spoken about these changes and their effects. And first, I just want to say that, the intentions were good and you got together, but you started I think, a goal. Your goal was, how can we increase housing? I don't want to get into, I won't argue about, were you listening to the state or whatever, but you started with that goal, but the thing about zoning is about the people and how they're going to live together and get along and live well together. And so you're removing, so I've heard people talk about the process has been compromised in certain ways. And I just want to say that the process is a good thing, because without the process, you end up with people mad at other people because suddenly, so I really think these things count. I also think the height, the other one, I am concerned about traffic, and you can't drive down East Main Street without driving on the other lane at least half the way, but we're all good at it. We all do it. We don't even slow down. We know the guy on the other side will move over to the right or the left. But it's all right. But this is also, but in thinking about increasing housing, we also have to think about that this is an island. We have a unique set of topography and roads. There are a lot of bottlenecks. We have the two, there's one-way streets, bottlenecks and things which make us different. Jason, I'll just, take issue with you saying it's like other towns. We're not like other towns. So maybe we need to not think and drink the Kool-Aid that's coming down the same way other towns do. That's all. And it's going on tonight. I agree. I'm really against the height. I've fought a lot of battles. Across the street from me, there's a 30-foot house that if it went to 35 would be a giant thing towering over the street. I realize it's non-conforming, it would need a variance, but it's an example of something that hasn't been discussed which is the character of where we live, and the scale. Like, bigger isn't necessarily better. And I don't think many of us feel that. So the smaller scale is nice, and raising these height limits is only going to make things more unappealing. So I don't know. I know it's the end of the night. I think but I also want to say that the people who've spoken against, I'll go back to Lisa. The other day, this was maybe the first meeting, she talked about, the tangible and intangible elements of views. And views are, Sharon wasn't sure, but views are protected in our ordinance. The land court judge who sided with the developer and against the city council at the 116 East Main Street, even he admitted during the trial that views do count. So they do count. And I think by an automatic 35 feet does have an effect. It's sort of like someone in Ward 5 made a nice analogy saying that all these houses in Gloucester were all sitting like in stadium seating in a theater. Well, it's almost like, well, if you award the person in the front row the ability to wear a 2-foot high top hat, then everybody behind him has to stand up to see the movie, and sort of what, to protect one special interest there. I can understand you're wanting more multi-housing because of the extra height, but the part about protecting the rights of people who live in the tidal zone, frankly, maybe they need to just lose a story and go up on stilts and stay the same height. Why do they aren't entitled? FEMA doesn't entitle them to anything. I know our zoning board has taken the position that that's the way it is, but that scares me too. And it needs to be fought at some point, I think. And it was fought over in Wingersheek when the judge, and the Superior Court judge, overturned the decision to grant that 35 feet or 40 feet or whatever. So I don't know. Anyway.
We're going to wrap up, Gully, and we got one more. It's the 917. And this is it, right, Scott?
Yeah,
I turn into a pumpkin. At 8 o'clock, I go bright orange and turn into a pumpkin. So
yep, and we'd like to wrap up. So this is our last speaker this evening. Sorry, Gordon. Please introduce yourself.
Oh, hi, my name is Catherine Ryan, and I'm in Ward 1.
Hi,
17
Catherine.
High Rock.
Hi.
Hey,
Sorry, what was your address?
17 High Rock.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, go for it.
So I have a couple comments and a couple questions. And I'm going to start by saying I hope that this vote that's tentatively scheduled for the end of February can be pushed back. And I heard your suggestion about splitting it out over 3 days because of time constraints with listening and to make it easier to vote. But I think something that happens when people listening to meetings is they hear other comments. And even though it is repetitious to be on the side where you are listening to it, not everybody gets to hear everything. And it's powerful to hear it, you know, as a totality. So I just wanted to make those two comments at the top. Also, I want to say that I served on several downtown committees, including Reimagining Railroad Avenue. And these were specifically tied to the MBTA build outs in downtown and adding amenities and things to make it more comprehensible for people getting off the train to walk downtown, for putting in sidewalks that, you know, are for Maplewood residents so they can actually walk to the Y that used to be there or to Main Street. It was about investing in the downtown, perhaps thinking about putting more trees and green space because these are things that people brought up as values. So what strikes me also, you know, way back in 2000, you know, the nationally known Project for Public Spaces came in and did an analysis of the railroad downtown area in association with the city and with Cape Ann Transportation Authority. And as other people have mentioned, there have been multiple community feedback, and it is strikingly consistent, and it's being reduced to sort of a decision about people not wanting it in their neighborhood. And I don't think that's consistently what's said. When you look at the feedback, it's struggling with how to bring in affordability, whether it's for multiple generation sharing in households, whether it's for artists who want studios, whether it's for seniors, whether it's for a mosaic. And in fact, we brought in the MAPC, you know, after 2000, you know, multiple successive grants, and they did, you know, fantastic breakdown of our economics and the housing and what available stock there was. And what stood out was this mosaic. So I'm opposed to the way this is being presented with these ordinance changes, specifically because it's sort of undermining those things that we were trying to put in to help to target those. And I think we're losing track. And I think on top of it, it's, you know, just because you're saying you want to make incremental changes and it's going to help, what we're seeing is it's exasperated. And this to me is pushing it along those lines instead of these greater discussions. And I'm hoping that there's more discussion, that the votes push back, but I want to bring up two more things. And I know I might be going over my 3 minutes, but nobody took the 15 minutes. And there have been other times that people are going over.
Let's just, I mean,
But
let's
there's
keep it
some
going.
comments that are being made. I'm just going to say this, okay? Because in some ways, the ward that is being hit, the downtown. Oh, by the way, you should put that map up on the link page of the zoning map. That should be on the page. So when people are coming to these meetings, they can look. Oh, where is CB? Where is CCD? Where is R5? And I want to tell you, just in the past 6 months, the comments that I'm hearing are dominantly unfair for the downtown neighborhood. And I think we have to talk about it because we're talking about making these decisions related to making it more fair and equitable across the city. But I want to point out, this is the November meeting of the pot shop. the defense of the building around the development that's at the downtown train station, which has mixed use and the pot shops going in. The comment that was made that wasn't even pushed back by anybody. The people who come to marijuana shops are upscale shoppers. They have above medium income. They're spending a lot of money. These are the type of people we want to attract to our neighborhoods, so they take the place of the people we don't want. That is at a city council meeting, and nobody said anything. The next one, Jesse Alderman, who is the lawyer, who is part of the cannabis board, who helped write the code, said the security measures in that neighborhood, taken in my view, are the best related to a pot shop. Rather than taking the view that a licensed dispensary is inviting crime, it's the best thing you can do for a neighborhood short of putting a police station in that site. And I'm going to go back to this reimagining railroad that I was on. When people talked about what they wanted, when people talked about, housing and reimagining, it was profoundly the same as 2000 or 2004 or 1990. They were saying that they wanted to have emphasis on sidewalks, signage, street care, making it easier for seniors, bike rentals, safety, young families. They use terms such as soft and hardscaping, this variety, this nuance, maker spaces, lighting, trees, future businesses, single stories. Design is important, tying it into the environment, tying it into, it's such a full conversation, and it is specifically related to MAPC, and it is specifically related to development and building and getting investment. And when we were having these meetings, we were trying to get investment that was thoughtful, that was going to help bring in parks and trees and walking, not divorce that entire conversation.
Okay.
And these comments are really, 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 in fact, they are in, Sean, they're in your article that you just wrote, your letter in the paper. I appreciate all your efforts. I was on these committees for years as well. We also on those committees have amazing help from all the city departments. You aren't volunteering with no help and useless hours like a million other committees. People volunteer and work so hard.
I don't think anybody's made that suggestion, though. I think Sean knows.
No, it
very
is.
much how
We're hearing this, and I've listened to every meeting. Every meeting says how much hours and how committed. This is decades of commitment, and the problem is getting exasperated. And I think this is a strong thing, and we have to talk about. It's not okay to use these descriptions as a defense of why it's going to be dominant in that neighborhood. The article that was in the paper last week said, don't worry, it's mostly not going to be in any of those other wards. Your charming neighborhoods, you use that word in that letter to the editor.
No,
the charm of those neighborhoods isn't going to be impacted.
Right,
So is downtown not charming?
No,
If we can let Sean respond.
I live
Wrap it
downtown,
up.
Catherine, and I love downtown, and actually downtown happens to be a priority of mine. But my point in that letter was in response to people specifically who were saying that those neighborhoods, those outlying neighborhoods, because frankly, most people who don't live downtown are not as concerned with how downtown is developed. We had people at the meeting last night saying that all of this development and additional housing belongs downtown, not spread throughout. So my point in
Sean,
saying,
my point is I've been on these meetings too, and have listened to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of people giving feedback, and I don't believe that to be true. And I'm telling you, in these recent meetings, I'm hearing comments that are really, really disturbing, including at the January Planning Board meeting, where we're starting to talk about tracking excise tax downtown to tie it to parking. So if it really doesn't need all the parking lots, we'll be able to track that by the excise tax. And then also hearing comments from councilor members where they're saying all the height downtown is already high. So you can go higher down there because that's the density and that's the expectation. But it isn't. The mosaic and the variety is character.
I'm not sure what
it's
meaning you're talking about with the excise tax, because excise tax is not in the purview of planning board. That
Planning board.
discussion. That
It's
discussion
not,
wouldn't be-
but they're all but they are all of the same comments related to planning downtown, and the parking is part of it. And we have excellent parking help in studies in the past 10 years, which I'm happy to pull those out too if you need them. But I think the link to the MAPC thing related to the MBTA, multiple reports over the past 10 years can be linked. I think you need to put the map. And I'm sorry, but I'm so upset about the comments related to the downtown and the type of people we want to have downtown. And if that's the buildup, you know, we all know that both Shaws were both sold. You know, these conversations are about planning and affordability. And that's not coming through with these changes. And I'm sorry if you haven't seen those, but I'm sure you have. I mean, have you seen them?
I would love to talk with you about this more. I'm not actually picking up on the particular points you're making tonight about the downtown comments or whatnot. But like I said, my telephone number is on the website, planning board website. You're welcome to call me anytime. I would love to talk with you more about this. I would love to talk with you about your experience on the committee looking at Railroad Avenue.
Yep.
But at this point, I'm just not sure what I'm
And
suffering a
I think we do
disconnect
need,
for.
we are past deadline. It is just past 8 o'clock now, so I'd like to wrap it up. Catherine, I do appreciate your passion and your commitment and your involvement. And I think that we'd like to carry on the conversation, but not this evening at this point. As we do wrap up, I'd like to mention
Appreciate
that.
it.
Thank you, Catherine. As we wrap up this evening, there's still some 50 people that are listening online, but I'd like to point out that our council president has worked with the clerk's office and our IT department, and they've posted an extensive link from the city's website to the Planning and Development Subcommittee, which lists a number of these. Here we are. Thank you, Sherry. That this is a direct page off the city's website, and there are clickable links there for many of these reviews, meetings, proposals, studies, as well as links to each of the last, to tonight and the last 4 ward meeting discussions, so that there's a comprehensive, for those who have the time and the interest, source of material. And we will be, as Catherine requested, making sure that we've added the zoning map to this as well. Any other comments, Jason, or?
No, I want to
Ron?
thank everybody for the comments and the questions and the discussion. It's clearly an issue that raises passions. And I do want to thank Sherry for hanging out with us for this long. And of course, Sean, you know, battling through your current infirmament. We appreciate that. I do invite people to continue to pay attention. These ward meetings will be synthesized, and we'll be bringing them up at the next planning and development meeting, where we'll discuss not only the results and the tenor of these meetings, but also sort of our next steps moving forward. We are tentatively scheduled for the 22nd for a public hearing on this, assuming that we make recommendations out of P&D on Wednesday. If we don't, which I'm largely thinking, without being official, that that's unlikely, my guess is that the public hearing will be continued beyond that. But at the moment, it's currently scheduled for the 22nd, and I don't want to give anybody the impression that it's not, so that they don't show up. But do pay attention to what's going on next Wednesday, and we'll have some more clarity on that day. And if we need to put it off for another couple of weeks to continue the discussion and the deliberation, we will do that.
And again, I'd like to thank everybody and remind you that we've kept notes for this evening. We're transcribing your questions. They're being all submitted in writing to the planning board. Yeah, Sean finishes his and I finish mine. Sean, you wanted to speak?
Yeah, just to thank both of you for letting me be here, and just to let everyone else know, just like as I told Catherine before, my telephone number is on the planning board website. My official role in this, in terms of a vote, is done. I voted in favor of all these to move them forward to the city council. But if anyone has questions that they would like more information on either how we got here or what the specifics are within the amendments, I'm happy to talk to folks. If people have additional ideas, as Catherine was talking about, in terms of doing other things with our zoning to help improve the city, I'm all ears on that. Also, feel free to reach out.
You know, everybody's passion has been very clear and strong. And the planning board and the planning and development committee have tried to keep focused on the narrow amendments being proposed here. But as everybody very rightly points out, there are impacts and impacts, and it's important to try and take as holistic and comprehensive a view and about how this impacts quality of life and sewer and water and infrastructure and resiliency. That's not in the purview of these specific ordinances that were being considered, the zoning regulation changes, but it needs to be in the big picture of things. And that's what's come across loud and clear again this evening.
Very good.
Motion to adjourn, gentlemen. Sherry.
Let's do it. Thank you very much, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thanks, folks.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you, Don. Thank you.